Hello, everyone. Welcome to Gladstone Planning Commission, Gladstone City Hall, 525 Portland Avenue, Gladstone, Oregon. Today is Tuesday, February the 19th, 2019. The time is approximately 6:30 p.m. Please call the roll.
Commissioner Langston?
Present.
Commissioner Natalie Smith? Chair Rowlett, I did receive a notification from Natalie Smith that she's unable to be here tonight as she is ill.
Thank you.
Commissioner Malachi?
Here.
Commissioner Poole?
Here.
Commissioner Wentz?
Here.
Commissioner Pat Smith?
Here.
Chair Rowlett?
Here. Let's salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome everyone. I'm going to read the agenda for tonight. And do we have any correspondence or additional correspondence? So first off, we do the consent agenda, which is basically the minutes from the last meeting and notes. And once we approve that, we'll open up any business from the public. So if you have anything that you want to talk about after the minutes, after we approve the minutes, you're welcome to do that. And we'll also have a few minutes at the end of the meeting after the public hearing where you can make comments regarding whatever you want. So the regular agenda will be the monthly planning report. Then we have a briefing for administrative decisions for floodplain development permit. It's a briefing about some things that we have. And then we'll have a public hearing with regarding 165 East Exeter. And then again, we'll have comments from the public, business from the Planning Commission, which will have a discussion about a couple things that some new business. So with that, do we have any changes to the consent agenda, or are we ready to vote to approve that?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Moved Malachi and seconded by Pat Smith, Commissioner Pat Smith. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed? The agenda is approved. So is there anybody that would like to speak about anything that's not on the agenda tonight? So then let's go to the regular agenda, which will start with the monthly planning report.
Thank you. So you'll see a bit of an uptick in pre-application conferences on there. One of them is for an administrative item that Liz is going to kind of brief you on a little bit. The other two, we don't have a design review application in yet, but it's my understanding that the applicants are working on getting that in soon. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. And then there's quite a few kind of project tracking items on the back. One of them, I think we received information on Webster Road for the apartments that the applicant is expecting to submit that in the next month or so. The other ones, I think we've kind of kept you updated on, but if you have any questions, let me know about that too.
So one comment I have about the planning report is you have approval of Autotown. Wasn't that Tonkin that we approved?
Sorry about that. We can correct that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, just make a note on that. Anything? Questions? Comments? Okay, now we'll have the next agenda item, which is a briefing for administrative decisions.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Vance. I'm assisting Melissa in doing Gladstone planning work. This is the 82nd Bridge project. This project was applied for by Water Environment Services. I believe it's been in the works with the City of Gladstone. I believe it's been in the works with the city of Gladstone for about a year or so. We finally got all of the applications
Hold on a
in.
second. If anybody needs to move to see the screen, you can do that.
Yeah, if you want to move around because the screen is kind of pointing this way, please just get up and move to wherever you feel comfortable. And I'll even get a chair for you if you want.
And so here's kind of an aerial image. It's the pedestrian crossing, the 82nd Bridge, I think historically known as Park Place. It's adjacent to the Cross Park. This will be removing the... sorry, let me get one more ahead. Just wanted to show this. So what's going to be happening is that these wooden beams under the bridge are kind of structurally unsound. So to do seismic upgrades, they're going to be removing these and creating a one cement clear span beam. So these will be removed, and then further along in the presentation you'll see the proposal. With that, all of this proposal is located, I'll go back a little bit. Our applicant is Water Environment Services, and Jessica Renner is here today, and she's representing WES for Clackamas County. This project is funded through WES, and I believe they've gotten a good amount of grants. There's been previous approvals through Oregon City. They've done land use reviews for the work on the other side of the bridge. And then there was an easement that was approved last year to allow WES to do this work in this section of the bridge. So they're going to be replacing the timber spans at the bridge's north approach with a single concrete span, incorporate seismic retrofits to the main span piers, and upgrade and replace the sanitary sewer force main on the downstream side of the river. This property is owned open space, and so all the work is happening. This is again the image, and this is looking towards the park from under the bridge. All this work is happening pretty close to the Clackamas River, and so you've got a habitat conservation area, a water quality resource area, and the floodplain. And all this work is happening entirely in that. So through that, there is 5 subsequent environmental reviews required. There's the habitat conservation area map verification, the water quality area map verification, the habitat conservation area development permit with the construction management plan, and then a floodplain development permit. There's going to be about 4,000 feet of disturbance area under the bridge with about 120 cubic yards of earth movement happening in that area. And so with that disturbance, the water quality, the WUCRA area, there's an allowance in there that if that area is restored, it doesn't have to go through an additional review, and so they're proposing to put in, they have restoration in that entire area, and then in addition, the habitat conservation development permit requires additional mitigation of 120 plant species. That can be on-site or off-site because this area is so kind of, it's going to be under a bridge, and so putting 120 trees and shrubs there isn't quite feasible. We've agreed on an off-site restoration area on downstream a little bit on the other side of the river. So this is a aerial image of, you can kind of see the bridge, and then you have the habitat conservation area layer, the red, and then that's also included in the flood management area, the floodway as well. And so that's kind of showing all of the environmental layers kind of requiring all of the permits that we're looking at. And this is the water quality resource area. This is the disturbance area, and so if you look, you can see, is there a laser pointer? Yeah. Oh wait, that's not going to work on the screen now. The yellow area, you can see at the end of it, there's a small little rectangle. That would be the footing of the new bridge, and then all of this is kind of like a cutaway without showing the bridge. But all of the under earthwork with the elevations and contours. There's 2 areas to the top and bottom of the screen that are kind of the off-site staging areas, and then the under bridge areas where that 120 square feet of earth movement is going to happen. But that's all going to be replanted with a mix of grasses and shrubs to kind of stabilize that bank area. And so this is a better kind of image of the actual bridge as the area that's going to be worked on and improved. And then this is a cross section showing the same thing that's shown in that photo, but you get to see the new support beam with the cross span with the underneath area. You can see the The crosshatch lines are the area that's going to be removed for the grading, and then you can see the pathway, the pedestrian trail is going to remain. The biggest reason that I wanted to do a briefing, or we wanted to do a briefing today, is because this work is going to require closing down this pedestrian bridge for probably about 6 months, with some maybe intermittent use of this pedestrian crossing. And this is a administrative decision that's open to appeal, but it's just something that we want people to be aware of and for you all to know about, so when the public has questions about it, want to know what's happening. The closure is going to be improving this bridge greatly, but it is going to be a little bit of an inconvenience. Wes has been working on in about 2007, the Oregon City side of the bridge experienced a fire, and so they replaced all of their wood beam structure with concrete structure kind of in an emergency fashion. And so it's my understanding that maybe something very similar happened then. There's about a 2-mile detour route for bike traffic and travel. There will be detour signs posted at all the approaches, so people won't just get to the bridge and have to turn around and go 2 miles. And so Wes is working with the city and right-of-way in their permits to make sure those detour routes are clearly identified, and then doing a lot of community outreach to make sure that detour path is
So,
all
speaking
compliant.
on that point specifically,
Yeah.
I went by today, and
Yeah.
there were cars in the roundabout and pedestrians on that section, and it's going to stop right at that fence that's going to be put up.
Yeah.
Can we have one of those detour signs for the pedestrians right at the entrance to the park,
Okay.
just to discourage them going that little extra way and then
Yeah.
having to walk into the roundabout?
Yeah, and I believe that was discussed a little bit in our pre-application meeting, and that's something where I believe Wes is going to be working pretty closely with the city to make sure that people don't drive too far, have to go about the roundabout.
I'm
and then
specifically thinking about keeping the pedestrians from walking into the roundabout when they get to the end
Yeah.
of it.
Okay. Perfect. But other than that, that's kind of the project in a nutshell. Any questions or concerns right now? Yeah. Hi.
Well, it looks like a great idea. I'm glad for it. You said the plants that were going to be replaced are going to be replaced on the other side of the river, on the
Yes.
Oregon City side?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be replaced on the Gladstone side?
There's nothing in the Gladstone in the code that addresses where the restoration area has to be as far as like within the city limits. It just says it has to be within a proximity. And then if you look, the area that we're going, I don't know if my laser pointer is going to work, but it's kind of at the bend where there's a straight line in the river. The bend comes in, it's going to be right in that area. At the top bend.
A straight line where the bend comes in.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
right. Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you
But
see it?
still, I do see it.
Yeah.
But I don't understand if it doesn't matter where it has to be. Still, and I understand it can't
Yeah.
be under the bridge
Yeah.
because it's under the bridge. But I would still prefer to see it be put into Gladstone,
Okay.
specifically down there by the Green Bridge.
Okay.
Behind the coffee place, there's
Okay.
like an area there where the bowling alley and stuff used
Yeah.
to be, and it seems like that could use it probably more than.
Okay. And I can continue that conversation. This is an administrative decision, so I can work with Wes a little bit more and see. We can maybe break up the plants. I think they have an existing project there that has restoration, and so for monitoring and long-term management, they felt that was a little bit more feasible. But we can look at other sites as well.
Okay, well I understand they might want it for their other project,
Yeah.
but since it's in Gladstone,
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that we should get them.
And we can certainly coordinate with Wes on that. The code only requires them to do it within the same watershed. So unfortunately, we
No,
don't
I
have a lot of
understand.
requirements
we
to
can
condition
maybe
it
break
for
it
that,
up
but
or
we can coordinate with them.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's just I feel like oftentimes Gladstone is given the short end of sticks, so I really don't want to see all the plants going to the other side of the river.
Yeah.
And we communicated that preference in meetings with them too, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Continue that discussion.
So, does a city own that bridge? Who actually owns that bridge? I understand that the access, on the Oregon City side is why they had all their planning stuff. That used to be before the I-205 opened, that was how you got to Oregon City.
Yeah.
If you were going to go, one way besides McLaughlin, that was the other way.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about the history, and it appears to be all owned by the city of Gladstone with an easement. So when you look at the... No. Sorry, okay.
That was the city of Gladstone's bridge.
Okay.
And you sold it to us for $1
was gonna
many,
say.
many years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I know after the bridge closed and, you know, there was something went on, that's why I was kinda wondering, because now the city doesn't pay to maintain the bridge, it's you, because you wanna have sewer and power and different things running across there instead of digging a channel under the river or whatever.
So yeah, West.
So if you wanna go ahead and go to the mic and just state your name and who you represent for the record.
Jessica Renner. I work for Water Environment Services. Many years ago, I don't know exactly when, West purchased the bridge from the city of Gladstone with the understanding that we could use it as a utility crossing, but also keep it open for pedestrian and bicyclists. We worked with you last summer and got the easement under the bridge of the property. So we do not own the property underneath the bridge, but we have an easement on that tail that crosses the river so that we can work on it. And then we're doing this not only for our own, purposes of having a sewer main crossing so we can get sewage to the Tri-Cities treatment plant, but we're also doing seismic upgrades in the hopes that this will be, and actually we also structurally upgraded the bridge to allow for truck traffic. So in the event that something does happen, hopefully this bridge will still be standing and there'll be a crossing between Gladstone and Oregon City for emergency vehicles.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know that. Okay.
And sorry to scream out from the back of the audience.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you.
No,
Yeah,
no,
very helpful.
no problem.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I have a comment, just a concern. Certainly, I'm sure that all the permits and keeping it clean and tidy and doing a good job will happen because of the area it's in and how important it is. So I don't have any concerns there. My concern is it's going to be closed for 6 months. And while it's closed, as a contractor, I would look at it as kind of an attraction nuisance, even though it isn't.
No.
You know, when it's closed and nobody's down there, that's when the graffiti comes. That's when you get people, oh, the kids are playing. And so I know you're used to dealing with this, but I've just got real concerns about the graffiti that's appearing down there and the fact that while this is closed and the normal usage isn't there, are we going to have more problems? It's just one of those things that's become more and more of a concern, and I know it's somewhere in your mind. I know you're not just going to put up a little yellow stripe and say stay back.
Yeah, we had discussed that in the pre-application conference as well, and there was some conversation about just, general, people see a fence and they want to jump over it.
Right, right.
Kind of human
and
nature
especially kids.
Conversation,
That's
yeah.
a place for kids to play.
And then also there's a swimming hole that people love to
Exactly.
get to, and this might be during the summer months because that's when you can do work in water, so the timing is a little bit contradictory to the way people want to use this bridge. And so there will be chain link fencing up, and there'll be, I think that we had discussed maybe adding a little bit more chain link fencing in some additional areas to kind of keep people out a little bit more safely. It's going to be actively worked on pretty regularly. It's just in the evening hours and the weekend hours that...
Right, the late summer night, nobody's around. And
the best conditions we have are to kind of have some more fencing put up to protect the area, make it harder to get in. And so from there, that's the best we can do.
And inherently, we're still going to, it's not a bad place, but you're going to have a certain amount of folks that are going to come there, and they're going to drink, and they're going to jump in the river, and I just want to make sure that we're watching out for ourselves. We don't get sued because somebody did something stupid and fell in the river. I mean, something foolish.
Yeah.
And fell in the river.
The police chief was in the pre-application conference with us, as well as Mike Funk, the fire department chief. So we're kind of looped in on the public safety component, and I think we'll, alert them when this gets approved and construction and everything, so they'll know that the construction's going on and to be aware of the potential for that. And
there was also some discussion about emergency vehicles or if something happens on the bridge to be able to get to people and access, and the discussion was if there's a time where the bridge is accessible and an emergency vehicle needs to get across it, they will be able to.
Well, appreciate that.
The span won't be gone for the entire time. Yeah.
Well, we've lost one bridge, and there's no way we can lose another.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
I had a question. It mentions in here that there's going to be the number of cubic yards of grading and total disturbance of about 4,000 square feet. Is that earth removed, or is it just moved around and put back?
So it's, the 129 cubic yards is removed.
Gone,
gone.
Not to be returned.
Yeah, and that's kind of in that cross section. You can kind of see. Let me get there.
Underwater removal, or is
No,
it
no,
removal?
it's all under the span. So in this image, you can kind of see that cross section. See the crosshatch section? That's all the earth that's going to be removed.
Okay.
And so that's where the most removal is going to be. There's going to be some additional grading that you can kind of see here. The main disturbance area is that area in yellow, and then the two areas that have the arrows to them on either side are kind of like staging areas. There will be some disturbance, but it won't be dirt moving. It'll be more just like ground disturbance.
They've balanced the cut and fill for FEMA for the floodplain. They've made that analysis, so we're consistent with
And
it.
then just to from the novice's point of view, how about erosion? If you're moving all this stuff, plants being left and not being replaced, what's going to control water runoff in that area?
There is going to be the replacement of the grasses and sedges is kind of going to be helping with the erosion, and then there's erosion control fencing, and then there's additional state requirements that will have more erosion control measures as well, and so there's the construction management plan.
All right. Anything else, anyone? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And just so you know, if people call you, feel free to contact me with any questions, and I'll be happy to field any
What's your
questions.
cell number?
My personal phone number. Perfect.
One,
Yeah.
one last question. When is it supposed to start construction?
Kind of.
We haven't put the project out to bid yet. We were waiting on approved permits before doing that. By the time we bid and all that, we're not looking at construction until June.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it would be 6 months from then.
I'm hoping to get the decision out mid next week, and that starts the 15-day comment appeal period, and so that's when you might start getting phone calls and questions. Is sometime mid next week.
What kind of considerations? You said there might be intermittent opportunities for people that use the bridge.
Mhm.
Like what? How likely is that? I mean, it looks like they're taking up a ton of space, so that
Yeah.
access is going to be tough.
Yeah.
Especially because you've taken up half the road.
The bridges in it.
Yeah.
There's going to be a time during the construction when there isn't a way to get from the
Right.
cul-de-sac to
Yeah,
the bridge, because
yeah.
there's going to be a 60-foot
Yeah, I could
span of air.
see that on
Okay,
that.
you've got
Yeah.
the drawing of it.
Mhm.
Once that's replaced, if it's secure and there's side rails and all that, we
Mhm.
can open it up on weekends
Yeah,
for
yeah.
people to cross and use it. But at the time when there's nothing spanning
Right.
that gap, we have to have it
Mhm.
closed. And then there will be work on the concrete piers underneath in water. And when they're
Right.
doing that, again, as long as there's a safe passage, we can open it up for weekend use. But while there physically isn't a 60-foot connection.
So are they replacing that connection then?
Yes.
Because
this
that whole part's wood.
It's supported by wood
Right.
pilings underneath.
Mhm.
So all of that will be removed, and it will be a solid span. So there
Oh,
will be
okay,
nothing
okay,
under
okay.
any
Yeah,
more.
single
Mhm.
concrete
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
steel
So this will be
base.
a solid
Yeah.
span across here.
Yeah. So that whole piece will be removed and replaced.
Okay. I thought it was just the support members on
Yeah.
the bottom.
And then I think 6 months was a pretty like worst case scenario
Yeah.
estimate. So I think the hope is that it wouldn't take that long.
Okay.
We understand, we don't want to upset people either.
Yeah.
A lot of our employees use this bridge
Yeah,
to cross
yeah.
back and forth, and
Yep.
the Tri-City plant, they walk across it to go to Safeway to get lunch.
Mhm.
So, we understand, the impacts, and we'll work with everybody to make it as smooth as possible.
Cool.
All right. Are we ready to move on to the public hearing? This is a quasi-judicial public hearing. File number is Z0597-18D, like Delta, and Z, like Zebra, 0598-18-C, like Charlie. And it's for the demolition of an existing single-family residence and construction of a new triplex residential building with attached single-car garages and associated site improvements of an existing 7,900 square foot lot at 165 East Exeter Street. and I'm gonna read a lot of stuff here that's really kinda hard to listen to, but it's by state law that we have to do that. And it's also will help you understand part of the process. The planning commission is appointed by the city council to act in their behalf. And when I read this, part of that is if you don't agree with the decision we make at the end, and you'll hear that when I read the script, that you can appeal to the city council. Otherwise, the decision is final. So now I'm going to read this. This evening, the hearing will be conducted as follows. The staff will present the staff report. So if you have the packet, that's the staff will read that. Questions by the hearing body for staff. Then we will open the public hearing for testimony, and the time will be 3 minutes if you have the card filled out. If you don't have the card filled out, please, at that table over there, there's a card to fill out so that we have on public record your name. So you have 3 minutes, and the applicant will present the packet, basically what they're doing. Then we'll have persons in favor of the application. That's the part where you'll speak. Persons opposed to the application can speak at that point. And then the applicant will rebut or have a time for rebuttal. And then after that, we will close the public hearing, and no comments can be made after that. So when the hearing is closed, we're going to be discussing that, and then a lot of times people will have something to say, and you cannot say anything during that time unless we reopen the public hearing, and we will do that if you want to. So if you really have something you want to say after the hearing's closed, we'll reopen the public hearing and allow you to say whatever you want to say within that 3 minute or so. Final comments by staff will be after that. Questions of staff, if any, by the commission. So the commission will ask questions, and then we'll discuss and deliberate. A decision may be made by the planning commission at the close of the hearing on this matter, or may be continued to a time and date certain. Any party may request a continuance of this hearing, or may request the record remain open for 7 days. So what that means is if you want to continue this hearing, anybody that testifies, so you have to testify to be a party or be a commissioner or one of the staff people. So anyone that's a party can request a continuance or that the record be left open so you could submit written material or anything like that. If the matter is continued to a date certain, this will be the only notice of that date you receive. So at that time, if you request a continuance, we will make a date, but there will be no mailings. Nothing is going to come in the mail or that you know. We'll let you know that now. If you speak, please come forward to the microphone, and when you come forward, please state your name and address for the record. You can just say Gladstone, Oregon if you want, but it's good to have on record your name and your address. In making a decision, the Commission must consider whether the application meets the relevant approval criteria of the city's land use regulations. Those criteria are identified in the staff report and are available in this room this evening. The testimony and evidence must address these criteria or other criteria that you believe apply to the decision. Please note, if you fail to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to enable the Commission, the applicant, and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal this issue to the City Council or the Land Use Board of Appeals. So if you have issues, raise them. If you don't, a decision is made and they haven't been raised, you may not be able to appeal. Unless the Commission is making a recommendation to the City Council, and tonight we're not making a recommendation, we're going to make a decision, the Commission's decision will be the City's final decision in this matter unless appealed to the City Council. So you can still appeal to the City Council. An appeal must be filed within 15 days and in accordance with Chapter 17.92 of the Gladstone Municipal Code. Failure by the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues regarding proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So make sure that you bring up any issues that you have, if you have any. At this time, I'd like to ask the members of the commission to disclose any ex parte contacts, bias, or conflicts of interest. And part of that is state law that requires every commission member to disclose any ex parte contact. In other words, any discussions they've had, visiting the site, knowledge of things that are not presented at this hearing. And bias would be if you're, if you feel, if any commission member feels like they have a bias, like any kind of bias that's going to not allow them to make an impartial decision, then we disclose that. Have members of the commission visit the site?
I have driven by the site, yes.
I went by the site today.
I'll go last because it's going to be a minute.
Yeah, I've been by.
I've been by the site, but I have no opinion.
I drove by the site and also discussed with Commissioner Malachi the removal of the 2 oak trees, that they damaged the foundation, and because he'd had a question about the demolition, and I thought the foundation would go too since the oak trees had damaged it.
Does anybody want to disclose any bias that's going to preclude them from making a decision? I have ex parte contact, and what that is I received a notification letter because I live, just very close. All of us that got that live close to the site. I also know the people that used to live there, and I've been in the house. And beyond that, my wife has opinions about things that, because she read the letter, and she, the oak trees are a big thing for her because she likes to watch the birds and stuff like that. That said, it's not going to change or make me change a decision because she likes the oak trees, or that I've been in the house and I know know the people that live there. So I think I can make an unbiased decision and an impartial decision, so I'm not going to recluse myself from the hearing. So, with that, will staff please present the
No,
oh.
You need to ask them if they want you to, right?
Oh, yeah. Where did I miss that? That's the next page. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the commission to hear this matter? So does anybody want to challenge that the planning commission should hear this? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge any planning commission member's ability to participate? And thank you for putting me on track. So everybody's good with the planning commission making the decision on this matter tonight, and you don't think that any members, particularly myself, should excuse themselves from the process? Hearing none, staff will now present the report.
Thank you. Planning Commission's considering today design review application number Z0597-18-DR, as well
and
as...
you can certainly come and just please, find a spot that you want to see the screen or not. I'm sorry.
No problem. As well as conditional use application Z0598-18-C. The proposed project includes demolition of an existing 1,053 square foot single-family home built in 1940 and the construction of a new triplex residential building with attached single-car garages and associated site improvements on an existing 7,900 square foot lot. The subject property is located 3 lots down from Portland Ave and next door to an existing apartment complex. You can see the location on the screen there where the yellow star is. So this is a street view on Google Earth of the property. I think it probably from 2018 at some point. So you can see the condition is somewhat dilapidated, and according to the owners, the interior is not suited for remodeling or restoration. As such, the proposed project would consist of new construction and infill development on the site. So the zoning of the site is R5. It's one of the 3 residential zoning districts in the city, closely located to the downtown corridor. The comprehensive plan designation is medium density residential, and the property size is 0.18 acres. There's no environmental overlays or any other land use applications required other than design review and conditional use. Public noticing followed code requirements. It was sent to the applicant, owners of subject property nearby, like Randy, and owners of record. I think it's within 250 feet of the subject property, as well as city departments, public works, fire, engineering, as well as West at the county. We received comments from city engineering and public works, and we'll talk about those in more depth further on in the presentation. The proposed triplex will contain 2 two-story 3-bedroom units and 1 single-story 2-bedroom unit. This request is subject to Chapter 17.12 R5 Single Family Residential District, Chapter 17.80 Design Review, the development standards of Title 17, as well as the standards of Section 17.70 for conditional uses. And that's because in the R5 zoning district, multifamily is not an outright permitted use, it's a conditional use. So a conditional use land use approval is required to permit the proposed multifamily development. The proposed development meets the minimum lot size area of 7,500 square feet for 3 units, complies with the front, side, and rear setbacks, and does not exceed 35 feet in height. Standards regarding trash enclosure requirements, energy efficient designs, and equipment and facilities are met. The applicant has provided a written description of the proposed lighting plan. However, a final lighting plan will be required as recommended in Special Condition Number 3 to satisfy Code Section 17.44020, Number 6. The proposed project meets all the multifamily design standards, including window requirements, architectural details, and window and roof design criteria. The proposed landscaping plan was developed to ensure compliance with the applicable landscaping standards of the zoning title. However, there are 3 areas of revision required in order to ensure that the proposed landscaping meets all applicable landscaping requirements of Title 17. Specifically, the proposed landscaping plan needs additional detail in order to ensure compliance with the required 20% landscaping coverage per Section 17.12.0504. The applicant will also need to submit additional information indicating they intend to irrigate and then maintain the landscaping over time per subsection 17.46.0203 and 4. The proposed project will provide 6 parking spaces meeting the parking requirements of the code for multifamily developments. Additionally, off-street parking and loading will be screened from abutting properties located in a residential zoning district. Required screening shall be accomplished by building placement, a landscaped earth berm, or site obscuring fence or hedge pursuant to the code. Required screening shall be a minimum of 6 feet high and shall not conflict with Gladstone Municipal Code Chapter 17.54 for clear vision requirements. Because the current landscaping plan is unclear whether or not they comply with those requirements, planning staff are recommending Special Condition Number 3 to ensure that the final plan set, revised in accordance with other recommended special conditions, conforms to the zoning title's parking screening requirements. So you can see it looks like there's landscaping in between the parking. We're just not exactly sure if it meets the elevation requirements, so we want to double check that. Gladstone Municipal Code Section 17.50.04014 requires the proposed curbs and driveways on the site to meet city standards. As such, the Public Works Director and engineering staff have been working closely with the applicant to ensure compliance with Section 17.50.04014. The Public Works Director has flexibility to waive Public Works standards when there is a conflict with a higher standard, such as the municipal code. Eliminating the driveway and garage to the middle unit would bring the project into compliance with the Public Works standards, but that concept would eliminate 2 off-street parking spaces in favor of 1 on-street parking space. As such, the applicant has consolidated the driveways, which supports Public Works Design Standards Section 5.007D4, requiring that curb cuts shall be kept to a minimum. Consolidation of driveways is preferred by Public Works, pursuant to comments that they submitted to City Planning staff.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
So, if they consolidate the driveways and those dividers are not there anymore, correct? It's just like one slab.
That's why we're requesting a revised landscaping
Okay.
plan, and we've attached the other special conditions so we can ensure the other screening standards are met and other requirements.
Okay.
Because we'll have to revise it. Yeah.
Ms. Ahrens, does the
Yes.
Public Works recommendation, what does that do with the on-street parking, the 1 space? Would that be allowed at that point, or would this nullify that and put all the parking back on the property?
So it's my understanding all the parking would still be provided on the property. There's no dependence on off-street parking spaces. It meets the code requirement for parking. Planning staff recommends special condition number 2 to require a revised site plan to ensure that Public Works driveway and pedestrian circulation standards are met. The proposed drainage system for this project is on-site disposal via an infiltration gallery located in the front yard and under a portion of the west driveway. Site-specific infiltration testing has been performed in this area for the purpose of sizing infiltration facilities. The project applicant has been working closely with City Public Works to determine that the stormwater treatment and detention standards are met. However, Public Works has stated that they will require the on-site water quality facility to be piped to overflow to 1 or more weep holes in the curb. The existing storm drainage system is consistent with the standards of this chapter, and no Public Works storm improvements would be necessary to that. As such, special condition number 2 will require the proposed project meet the City Public Works stormwater requirements prior to building permit issuance. So those were all findings for the design review approval. The conditional use findings are subject to the approval criteria in section 17.70.10, authorization to grant or deny. In that section, the criteria are A through E. So in the findings of the staff report, we went into a lot more detail for the findings of whether or not the project was compliant with each of these approval criteria, and I will just summarize for you right now and answer any questions you have. Specifically, the proposed project meets A, since section 17.12.040 identifies multifamily dwellings between 3 to 8 units as a conditional use. So because in the residential zoning district R5, the multifamily development that's proposed is a conditional use, it meets that approval criteria. Section B is met because proposed medium-density housing is suitable given the subject site's proximity to public transit and services such as schools, restaurants, retail, and grocery. Section C is met because TriMet bus service is available along Dartmouth Street and Portland Avenue within 1 block of the site. Public retail and commercial businesses are located nearby within the neighborhood, and schools, city offices, restaurants, and a grocery store are also nearby. Section D is satisfied because the development of a 3-unit residential building will provide an appropriate transition between the single-family residence to the east and the 8-unit multifamily complex to the west. And Section E is satisfied because the comprehensive plan designation for the property is medium-density residential, which allows 3 to 8-unit apartment buildings. So I'm happy to answer any questions and go into more detail.
I do have
as
some,
needed.
but I would actually like to address the public notice first.
Yeah.
So, I see on here that they can request from the county a copy for nominal charge. If possible, I'd like you to work with the city staff so we can start including a link to the PDF that's already on the city website that they could just download if they want to do that.
That's a great idea.
I think we should start doing that. If this is approved, I would also like the demo crew to know that there are cats living under that house right now.
Okay.
I saw them going under the house when I was by there earlier today.
Okay, I will note that and we can tell the owners, certainly.
On page 4-4, at the very top, what is the difference between B and D?
1 second. So I'm sorry, B and D?
Yeah.
So I think that's just a typo. It got included twice, so we can take one of those out.
Yeah.
And then on the next page, you mentioned that it's R5, and I guess just for the record, do we know why a 7,900 square foot lot is not R7.2?
I don't know. It could be it was just has always been platted that way, or it's been modified since it was originally platted to include part of another 5,000 square foot lot.
A lot of times, they combine two lots. And when I bought the lot where I live right now, originally it was 2 lots. And I had to go to the county and get it divided back. The original plat was 2 lots, or 2 lots, and then it was used as 1, so.
And they get the same zone for it.
Yeah.
Well, it's R5 zone, so if you could buy 5 lots and make it all 1 for yourself if you want, and then it'd be considered 1 tax lot. It's the way they're taxed. That area has a lot of different sized lots. I know for sure that's true. And with the apartments next door, they might have bought part of that lot.
That's what I was going to say. That's real common. Because you had 10,000 feet at some time, and now you've got about 8, so somebody sold off something, and if we dig deep enough, we can find out.
Can you go back to the picture you had that showed the driveways? So what is it that you said that you asked that you're going to get a new landscaping plan?
Mm-hmm.
What is it specifically you're wanting them to change?
So it's going to inherently change because the driveway and curbs are going to change pursuant to Public Works requirements. So we want a revised landscaping plan, just
So this
showing
is
the
if
new
we
site
do not
plan.
waive it. You're talking about we'd have to have it changed if we don't waive it.
So Public Works is requiring a modification to their proposed site plan, so they're going to be submitting a new site plan with their kind of stormwater, and then
My understanding reading this is you said that the requirement was that they had to change it, but that Public Works said that they're willing to waive it if we wanted them to.
So yeah, it's a little confusing how they worded it. I just took their exact verbiage from their letter. So they would be proposing a change to the site plan as currently submitted, and we would be taking whatever that, they're still, it's my understanding they're kind of with last minute back and forth, and they're still kind of working that out. And so we usually just put kind of a blanket condition on here saying we'll need, Public Works will sign off on a final site plan before building permits are issued. This is just gives you more detail into what exact changes Public Works is waiting on.
And
For
so
the site plan?
It's specifically about whether or not those 2 driveways are going to be collapsed or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so Public Works is recommending that they're consolidated, and then it's my understanding the curb cuts would change. And I didn't have as much time as I would normally like to dig into the details, and Jim was leaving on vacation, so kind of did the best we did with the findings, and we can work it out afterwards to make sure that Public Works is getting what they need, compliant with the code applicable for this. And the site plan, we're just assuming it's going to change a bit to comply with Public Works. And so in that, we would be recommending a revised landscaping plan showing the kind of footprint changes, and then also to show the screening, to make sure the landscape screening of the parking is compliant. And then also the agreement for landscaping to be maintained and irrigated.
Is the expectation that each driveway has a screen, or do they just need screen on each end of the property?
The intent of the code is really that it's screened from adjacent properties, so I can read you the exact language, but I think it doesn't have to really be as internally screened, just make sure that they're screening it from adjacent residential property.
Is that an existing tree there on the right side?
I think that's proposed because this is taken from the landscaping plan, yeah. And then we also recommended that a street tree be added to the landscaping plan, given the width of the property.
You done?
Sorry, any other questions? I was waiting for you guys to ask me.
I have one.
Go ahead.
On page 4-6, halfway down where it talks about building materials, it says screening for roof-mounted equipment is also discussed in this section. And that's the only mention of screening on roof-mounted equipment. Is
There
that
isn't any.
mandatory?
Sorry,
Halfway down, section 17.44.020
mhm.
in
Oh.
the...
That's a typo.
Okay.
That would be commercial or
Mhm. Be like a-
I mean, we
So
d-
it should just end after that code section.
Nothing about screening roof-mounted stuff?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
We're not building
I'll fix
Safeway.
that. Yep.
Never know.
That's what
I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of dish
Buy an air conditioner.
No.
TV things
We-
with screens around them, if that's the
Trying
rule.
to streamline staff time for
We're fine.
budgetary considerations, so sorry for the typo.
Okay. Quite all right.
Yeah.
All right. So the applicant may now present testimony and arguments. Is there anyone, okay, would you please, come forward and state your name and address for the record?
Hello, my name is Jessica Iceland. I'm with Iceland Architects, and I am the architect for the project. And I did want to clarify initially the driveway discussion. I think the comments that we got from Public Works were on a very preliminary proposal where what you're looking at here actually shows the consolidated driveways. Initially, we had 3 driveways, 3 curb cuts.
Mhm.
And so, based on our initial discussions, we did modify it so that 2 of the units, we are showing and proposing that we'll have a landscape strip actually in between the driveways, but the curb cut will be consolidated. So that was based on input that we got from Public Works.
so this is the final one that you proposed to Jim?
It is the one that we submitted for design review. As Melissa mentioned, we are still working some of the stormwater issues with Public Works, and so we may have some minor modifications as part of the building permit review process. So we'll continue to work with them.
Thanks for clarifying.
Sure. And I just wanted to very briefly explain a little bit of the background of this project, and I think it's in the letter that you received. I don't know if everyone received that, but the people who own this property are building it as a triplex. For the single level unit will be occupied by one of their relatives who has some limited disabilities. So it is their intent to occupy the one unit and keep the other 2 as an investment. But I think they are very vested in this project, and they'll be there. They're going to ensure that there's going to be landscape maintenance and the property is well maintained. The person who will be living there is currently a resident of Gladstone, but is looking for a better, more accessible living accommodation. Another thing just to mention is that while we're not required to meet the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act because of the limited size of the project, we have basically designed the single-story unit so that it would be accessible. I think we felt like it would be a good investment, and for future owners or whatever, that there would be one accessible unit on the project and then the 2 two-story units. So. But I just wanted to share that and say that I'm here if anyone has any questions, but I just wanted to share that little background with you.
So the 2 oak trees, they're not gonna stay.
Unfortunately, they just cannot. They when they originally purchased the property, they were intending to have their relative live in the existing residence, but when they bought it sight unseen. And when they actually looked at the property, they did see that there was quite a lot of damage to the foundations, and those oak trees, as beautiful as they are really in a location where they cannot develop that property and retain those oak trees. So unfortunately, I share your disappointment, but unfortunately they have to be removed.
Questions?
Was there any consideration given to a single level site construction on that site as opposed to a 2-story edifice?
For all 3 units?
Yes. Which is in character with the neighborhood.
Well, yes, there was some discussion basically in terms of trying to get as an investment, the property is somewhat unique in that a triplex is an allowed conditional use, whereas a duplex is not. And so to try to get 3 units on there, we had to make the 2 units fairly compact. We knew we wanted 1 single story, but in order to fit 2 additional units on the site, there was no way to do that without going up the second level.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Does anyone wish to speak in favor of the application? So anyone in the public that is for the application, can you please come forward and state your name for the record? Does anyone want to speak in favor of the application at this time?
Are you wanting people that have submitted cards? Is that what
Yes.
you're wanting? And we've
Uh-huh.
opened the public hearing, is that correct?
Yes.
Did we have a motion to open and,
I thought the hearing was already open. We need to open it again? We're in a public hearing now.
okay, I didn't have that down here, that we had
Sorry.
officially opened that, so, we'll just need to make sure we officially close that when you close. But I have received 3 cards for people wanting to speak.
Okay, well, let's just do that then. Let's
Okay.
just do the cards.
First one is Linda Cosgrove.
Linda Cosgrove. I live in Gladstone, and I guess I'm in opposition to this. I was with a group of people back in '98 and '99 that petitioned to have the duplexes removed from the R5 area. And the only reason that a triplex wasn't included in the petition is that no one thought it would happen. No one thought that Gladstone would become a place where they would start burning down houses and trying to build multifamily. That particular plot is ideally suited for a home with an attached dwelling unit. It would be ideal for a family to come into our city. Our school population is down, and one of the reasons being that there just isn't the available space for a young family to come in and purchase their home and invest in the community, because those houses, those first-time houses are just not out there. It would be very simple. It would not be simple, but it would be very adaptable to build a single-family home with an attached dwelling unit and bring in a family that would, they're a block from the school, 2 blocks from the park. There'll be a block from the new library when it comes in, and then they would stay. They would have an investment in their property, and they would stay. I recently ran across a copy of the petition that was originally filed in '98 and '99. It's in here. It was 935 signatures. Almost every homeowner in the R5 area signed against duplexes. Who would have thought that a triplex would come up? No one considered that. It would have been added had it come up. But again, this is the type of development that will block a young family from coming in and investing in their first home and becoming long-term members of our community. Another thing that I wanted to mention, aside, I'm glad you noticed that cats were living under the house. Rather than, the house could be recycled. There's lumber in that house that could be reused. But Gladstone doesn't require its houses to be recycled when they're demolished, but that could be. So I just wanted to remind you of the petition that took place in '98 and '99 and was finally put into effect in the year of 2000. It's on file here in City Hall someplace, but I did find a copy of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Linda.
Next is Mary Hanson.
My name's Mary Hansen. My husband and I and our youngest son live at 565 Chicago, which is right to the west of where this is going to be built. I have questions, but I'm not sure. I've never done this, so I don't know if it's the right kind of questions or what, but we needed to know when we first moved in, which was last April, the previous owners had built a fence that's on their property at the back of our land. And that was okayed by the little place that was renting out for weddings and stuff there. And so I don't know what's going to happen to that fence. And so I was wondering, are they going to fence the whole property with cyclone or what? The other one was, we are the people that have the 5 or 6 large cedar trees, and they are dying from the bottom up because of the drought, I guess, last year. And we want to know if we're going to have permission to bring a truck up onto that property behind us to trim those trees down at some time when the ground gets still better. And then this summer we had a huge sewer problem because we found out from a plumber not very far from us that there are 5 or 6 houses in that square block, on one line. And if this is going to be, are they going to have a new sewer system line put in with this? Because I don't think putting this onto what's already there would help anybody. And then, do you have any brochures or anything like that that would that we could get in touch with you so we could get permission to bring a truck onto the property sometime before it's built? What's kind of a timeline are we looking at?
If I could jump in, so the city's not going to have, if you're talking about onto the applicant's property, that permission is going to need to come from the applicant and not from the city. The city's not going to have the unilateral authority to grant a third-party access onto their property. That would be an issue that you'd need to contact the property owner and see what their timeline was and get an agreement for access from them.
Okay. And where do we go to ask who the property owner is?
I'd contact the applicant's representative this evening. She may be able to help you.
Okay, thank you.
And in regards to the sewer line issue you mentioned, can we have somebody follow up with Jim to see if there's an issue in that area?
So they've already looked at the sewer capacity in the area, capacity in the area. It's my understanding that everything's fine for them. It can accommodate the proposed development, but I don't know if it's on the same connection that you're on or on a different one.
Well, it's in the same square block, and it's just to the west, the one with all the big cedar trees.
The sewer system in Gladstone's pretty complicated from what I've seen at Public Works, so I would defer to Jim, but it's my understanding they've already looked at it. They didn't mention anything needed to be conditioned in their comments, and they look at that type of thing.
You guys are on Chicago, right?
Pardon?
You're on Chicago?
Yes.
So you're going towards the school, you're that house in the right in the middle of the block. This particular house is on, you go up the stop sign, you turn left, it's the second house on the left. So it's not really abutting you at all.
Really? Because the way we understood it, it was when we go up to the stop sign going north on Chicago, you turn right. And it's a great big empty lot.
If you go up to Chicago, or you go up Chicago to the stop sign, you're facing the school. You turn left, it's the second house on the left.
Oh, well, we're totally wrong then.
Yeah, I was trying to figure that out, 'cause I think I know your dog, for sure.
Mhm.
And, I see your husband out walking the dog all the time. Sorry we went over the time limit, but,
I think she's gonna try and pull up
That's right.
an image for...
Okay, then I guess we don't have any problem.
There was a,
Can you,
so
can you go back
there's
to
a house right there. It's on Exeter, so it'd be going towards Portland Avenue. It'd be the second house on the left.
Oh,
Can you go back one?
okay.
Not that one, the one
the aerial
next
view,
one.
the aerial
There
map.
there was one more that showed
Yeah,
that one.
the aerial map.
The subject property is outlined in blue.
So I know which house you guys are in. The fellow that was sitting next to you over there lives in the blue house on the corner.
Yes, the other guy, yeah.
Yeah, and you guys are in the second house.
Mhm.
That, I think what the part that you need, where you want to get access to your backyard, would be through the city lot back where the community center is there.
Okay,
That big empty lot there,
yes,
right by the school,
yes.
and you contact the city about that, the Public Works Director, Jim Wynot.
At the right place, see?
Mm-hmm. Right.
But, we're glad you came, and I think it was important that we went overtime to explain some of that.
Can you talk with Jackie at the end of the meeting, and she'll try and help you get contact information?
Okay, thank you.
Or you can call the city anytime.
If you're talking about the community club, that is privately owned.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
I thought it was
Correct.
city owned. No?
Yes. No, it's not
Okay.
owned by the city of Gladstone, but we can try and find you property owner information for the community club,
Okay.
because that is a separate, it's not a city property. And
I'm
you're
sorry,
Mary.
I thought that was city owned.
I can follow up with you and get you that information, okay?
Okay.
All right,
Well, thanks for testifying too. Next.
I'm sorry, that was the last one.
Oh, that's the last one?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Would the applicant like to provide rebuttal testimony at this point?
The only thing that I would like to add is that the community members' concern about young families, the owners did think about that because of the proximity of the school, and that was part of the reason why they specifically wanted to create 3-bedroom units, because they thought it would potentially accommodate a young family better than a 2-bedroom unit. So, that's it.
Okay, thank
you.
you. All right, does the staff have anything they would like to add or a recap?
No, given that it's not the right property she was thinking of, I don't need to respond to the fencing question. But,
Okay. Does any of the commission have questions regarding clarification of the testimony to this point? If there are no further questions, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing. Anybody?
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
Motion by Malachi and seconded by, Les. Cool. Commissioners, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no or nay. None opposed, motion passes. So the public testimony portion of the public hearing that I opened at the beginning is now closed. All right, deliberation. Any further questions of staff from the commission? Discussion?
So, when I went by earlier, because, I do remember the issue with the segregated parking entrances, that we've been discussing that for like a year and a half now. And so when I went to the property today, I was keeping that in mind when I was looking at the entrances that are there today. And what's on the property today is actually pretty bad. There's one entrance to the property that it's really poorly maintained at the moment. It's kind of broken up entrance with mud and rocks, and even though it is shown here as 2 separate entrances, it does look like there's enough room for a car to park between them. And I think it was
Can you bring that slide back?
That one, yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking at the maps on here. I forget the numbers. Let me pull it up here. One of these had the dimensions on it.
Yeah.
this one. And it looks like this space is 3'6" plus 5'6" plus another 3'6", right? So it's like, let's see, 8, 9, 12.5 feet. This would be more than enough for a single car pulling in. They wouldn't have to parallel or anything. So I think that there's enough room there for an extra car to park on street. Not necessarily for this property, but just in general for parking. I know parking is kind of sucky in that area. But I personally am okay with the 2 entrances. Given that it's, you know, giving us 6 off-street parking.
I like the driveways, I agree. The way that they've consolidated.
So you like this plan, what's on the screen, which is in our packet?
Yeah.
I agree with Malachi.
So what exactly would you do to modify that?
Well, I'm saying I think it's okay.
Oh, you think this is okay?
I think the
All right,
code...
I thought I heard you say something
I think
else.
the code wants there to only be 1 here.
So
I think it wants
the curb
2
cuts.
separate ones, right? They don't want the 2 driveways to have 1 apron.
No, I think our code only wants 1 entrance in a 30-foot area or something like that. I think the code doesn't want us to have more than 1 in a 30-foot.
So there's
But you're okay with what's on this?
But I'm okay with it because
Okay.
I think it improves.
What's on this page?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it improves what's already there. And given that it's giving us 6 off-street parking, I think that's better than
Okay.
increasing the parking requirements off-street.
I
Sorry,
agree.
just to clarify, so the city code defers to the city zoning title that we're reviewing for consistency with the project. It defers to city public works standards for this, and that's why we were coordinating with public
Yeah.
works, and so that driveway standard is from them, so that's why they were saying they could waive it if there's...
Yeah, and I was seeing in our packet, there was a section talking about it that was, you know, saying that we should basically discuss that on the bottom of 410. So that's kind of why I was bringing that up.
This is a sticking point for me. It's the only sticking point I see in the project. And I appreciate Malachi bringing it up. I'm concerned about the parking. The single-family residence, could you clarify how many trips it generates, just for the record?
Sure, so I'll go to that section. So there's a threshold for traffic impact study.
Right, and that's my real question is about parking spaces.
So it meets the code requirement for parking spaces for multifamily. So if you go to that section, you can see that table
Right.
for the requirements.
And
So
I guess where I'm going, my question wasn't whether or not it met it. My question was, we are increasing traffic to the property. We're going to have 3 units there. We're going to lose 1 parking spot on the street. And the city's been losing a lot of on-street parking. So my concern, of course, is if I could refer to what we have on Glen Echo. And what we have is nice multifamily row houses, very limited parking, and everybody fills up the garage and the driveway with their goodies, and not that that's going to happen here, and then everybody's out on the street. So I'm not saying that this is that large of a project, but my concern is it seems like every application we're losing more parking on the street, and there's a value there that far exceeds what what I'm trying to say is there's a give and take there, and it's just a concern because we're having more and more parking problems, and I see the parking and this access as being problematic. And again, outside of that, I don't really have big concerns.
Yeah, and I did think about that too, because obviously 1 entrance would be better, but I think to do this, it'd have to be wider, right?
Right.
I think having 6 off-street is good, or 6 on property is good, right?
The threshold for traffic impacts is 1,000 trips per day generated.
And certainly
if-
that's not my
So that's the
question.
only code requirement for us to look at mitigation for traffic impacts or vehicle trip impacts. So this project did not rise to that level, so there's nothing to trigger us requiring something in the code to mitigate for that, because there wouldn't be an impact of that level.
No, but again, we're asked to make a decision based on overriding a condition, and in this particular case, that's something that I think is it's easy to do, and then look back and say, "Wow, we're losing parking," or "Gee, we've got a parking problem," because lo and behold, folks are going to move in, they're going to have friends, they're going to have family, and I'm certainly not here to speak negatively of the project.
Mm-hmm.
I'm addressing a concern about we're giving away parking, and that's how I see it. And on many occasions I've asked, what is the value of a parking spot on a city street in this community, and I've never gotten an answer.
Mm-hmm. So,
and I don't expect you to answer that right now.
So the standard that would be modified is a public works standard that they're recommending modification of, and it wouldn't have any impact on the parking proposed. So there would still be 6 parking spaces provided.
I think what he's getting at is that extra driveway is a parking space that's not available on street. That's what he's getting at.
The neighborhood parking street and visitors parking, as we're bringing more traffic, and again, this isn't a high traffic large project, don't get me wrong, but we're bringing in more people and we're giving away more, and I look at it as, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in a way we're giving away, not giving away, we're losing, we're sacrificing parking. We're not giving away a street, but we are sacrificing parking as we're increasing the need for it.
With the Portland Avenue redevelopment plan, with no municipal parking involved, it's going to force people onto side streets if as this comes to fruition and begins to be used. I'm of the opinion that the city's business is not to provide parking for excessive vehicles from property that ought to be allowed to be stored on the property themselves somehow. Just doesn't seem to be a valuable use of the city's resources.
So what is that? Can you clarify, how does that apply? What are you saying in regards to this?
If you allow building on developments to be built, whether they're single-family homes with no parking or not enough adequate parking on the structure, everything ends up out in the streets.
Yeah.
And I don't think I think the intent is for transition. Periodically, grandma comes and stays for 2 weeks, but as a rule of thumb, parking on city streets in residential areas, in my mind, should be transitional. You come, you go, you leave. Come to dinner, you go to take your kids over to play with the neighbor kids, that type of thing. But just everybody has 3 cars from their house out in the street or from an apartment complex. At the base of Charlotte Way and Webster Road, there are 3 apartment complexes, and we've lived in that neighborhood for 36 years. We moved in there were never cars on the street on Webster, ever. And now there's a solid line of them on both sides because they don't have adequate parking for today's needs for use of on-site for that. So the city ends up providing parking for landlords, basically. It just doesn't seem to be an appropriate function to me. I'm sure I'm a lone wolf on that, but
that's a good question.
So as far as this application, they meet the criteria for parking.
Well, if indeed we choose to approve what they're recommending.
Well, the code, they meet the code.
They meet the code requirement of 6 parking spaces on the property provided.
And I think it would be wrong to deny someone the ability to use their property and looking forward to what might be happening down on a main city street to make sure that there's more parking for them in the future. I mean, that's madness.
Well, it wouldn't apply to this decision, but it didn't apply to my question either.
So did your question
My
apply to
question was
this?
specifically about
So the question is about
Losing one
section-
spot.
the bottom of page
saying
4.
Two driveways.
You know,
For
losing
two driveways.
street parking at a, when we're bringing more people. And again, I'm not trying to exaggerate. I'm not trying to say that this is some giant project and it's going to generate excessive trips. I'm making a clear concern about the loss of parking on this application to satisfy the change. That's my initial concern and still is.
Right, and
I'm
we
not bringing other things into it.
we certainly understand the concern about parking, and city staff have actually, after being contacted by DLCD, applied for free staff time from DLCD staff to review the parking code and provide us with input on ways to improve and studies about the existing parking status for future projects such as the downtown revitalization plan.
It's a little
So-
difficult because their recommendations are always the same and they go against what everybody keeps asking for. So that's a little difficult.
And of course, we have to use today's reality just as we do.
Does anybody wanna,
That's it's tough.
put a special condition in?
So I think what we're discussing is Jim's saying he supports waiving
So
it.
you wanna
and we
make
need
a
to decide as a
condition?
group
Do you
whether we're
wanna
gonna
do
waive
that?
it. I would like to hear whether other people on the planning commission
More
are
discussion
for or against it.
on the driveway.
Of whether we
So
want to.
specifically, it's if we want to modify that and say that it'd be okay for them to put the 30-foot.
Well, yeah, so
They can, basically, they have to have those two aprons to access that parking space. But the code does, this requirement won't allow them to have those two, but they'll waive it so they can. If we don't let them waive it, then they only have one apron to access those three driveways.
Right.
And the question is how they're going to do that. So you'd end up losing probably at least one of the driveways, which puts two cars on the road.
Yeah. So we just have to decide as a group if we're okay with support, with Jim's waiver, right?
So, you wanna put a condition in that they can waive it, or, I'm good with what's there,
Yeah.
myself.
I am as well,
And-
unless you have a
and-
concern about it. What about?
I don't.
Well, I think Les's concern was that with the extra driveway, we lose one space.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm
Langston
looking at
says
it.
that
That's
if we
exactly
go to
it.
one, we're gonna lose two parking spots
Have
on
a
the street because they'll have to
condition
use
going
those.
across,
Yeah.
saying, that the planning commission would support the public works.
Right.
Can we do that? Is that something we could do? Say that if, the applicant wanted to do what Jim is suggesting and make one apron,
Well, I don't
that
think-
we would allow that?
I don't think that's what Jim's
That's not what he's
suggesting.
suggesting. He's
What is he
suggesting
saying?
this, what's up
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, Jim's saying he's
Why are we
willing
having
to
all this
accept the waiver.
discussion about something when we all agree that this is okay then?
I'm not sure everyone agrees.
Right.
All right, so
Well, yeah.
I want to hear from somebody, I guess, at this point, what do you want? And then make, let's
Do you want a
think,
motion so
craft
we
a
can discuss
condition.
it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, I make a motion that we accept this condition as,
The waiver.
this waiver, as, the Public Works Director suggested.
I'm good with that.
And if you're concerned about any modifications changing the parking, you could put in there, amend it to say the 6 spaces will still be provided, even
I
if
guess
site
I'm
plan
just
changes,
confused
if
about-
that's a concern.
Why we had to do all that when we already have what's on
So
there.
the discussion is because not everybody on the planning commission is okay with the waiver.
And I made that so someone can second, we can discuss it and
All
get that
right,
over
you made a
with.
motion, you want to let's get a second.
I'll go ahead and second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. None opposed. That motion passes. So now what do we do? What's next?
Now,
You bring that up, let's go ahead.
Okay.
well, it's obvious that we're looking at a situation where they cannot build a duplex. They want to build a triplex. I understand that.
Yeah.
And I understand that we're here to make a decision about whether or not the impacts of this meet our code and what concerns we have, because I look at this on behalf of the citizens or the community as well as through the eyes of someone that wants to build something.
Hey, right now, what's
So
on
my
there,
question is, are we not giving valid consideration to city parking in this situation? I understand they're meeting the parking requirement for the property, but to do that, aren't we losing a parking space on the street?
so,
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the core issue that I keep
Yeah.
bringing up,
Mhm.
and I'm bringing it up because we are going to bring more traffic to that property, more traffic to the street. We've got all the schools, all the school kids, and my concern is that we are without much consideration losing a city asset to make this happen. And I'm
So I
not
guess
opposed with with what they're attempting to do here. Don't get me wrong. I understand why they're attempting to do what they're doing. So,
Mr. Chair, so what I think I'm hearing is maybe two conversations happening. We've got one, which is the quasi-judicial application that's before the Planning Commission hearing this evening, and that's what Melissa was referring to when she was saying that the criterion satisfied, that the 6 parking places have been met. And so that's the standard on which the application gets judged, and whether or not the Planning Commission approves or denies the application based on that criterion is satisfying it in this context. But also what I think you're saying, Commissioner Poole, is there's a larger conversation, generally speaking, the issue, the concern with parking in the city and the way things are going. So what I would say is 2 things. Those are 2 valid conversations, but the form and having the larger one wouldn't necessarily be in the context of the quasi-judicial application, because the criteria that the Planning Commission has to evaluate the application on are the adopted standards that the city has now.
With the exception of the waiver.
With the exception of the waiver being that we have countervailing standards, and it's not going to be necessarily possible to comply with both of them. The 30-foot separation is a countervailing standard that comes into place, and so staff's asked for some direction on what the commission wants in that context.
I would just like to clarify that certainly there is a bigger conversation about parking, but again, my concerns are directly specific to this application. But I understand.
So in that smaller context, if what I'm hearing you say is you think that the standard's not satisfied, the parking standard, which is the 6 spaces,
it's a matter of we're waiving some. I see what we're doing here, and I'm not trying to get hung up on it.
Right.
But I also see that in doing so, it's like we're having another impact.
Right.
A direct impact that's to the adjacent property, which happens to be the city street.
Right. Right. And so in our finite universe of standards and criteria, that's what the Planning Commission has to do, is decide what if the requirement's satisfied, and B, in looking at those 2, which is the best way in an exercise of your discretion to the extent that you can. You've got the thumbs up and the thumbs down as the standard's satisfied, but then if, presuming that the commission says that the standard's met here, if you want to give some direction to staff on how to balance those 2 forces within that, that's kind of the conversation of how to configure the driveway.
Well, and I believe that by making the change, we're already there. We're either going to do this or we aren't. So I appreciate your input.
And sorry, just to clarify the parking standards for multifamily, it's 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit.
And
so
that includes the garage?
No, it's per dwelling unit.
Okay.
A space provided per dwelling unit, so they're exceeding the standard. The trade-off with not going with the Public Works recommendation and waiving their standard would be that you lose 2 off-street parking spaces. So you then have those parking spaces potentially occupied by street parking, or they would be using street parking in lieu of off-street parking spaces. So that's the trade-off there.
Ms. Aaron, Commissioner Poole asked a question, I don't think it got answered.
Sorry,
Does the
yeah.
parking spaces include the garages?
I think it would. I'm not. It doesn't specify in here, but we've certainly counted that in the past. So I think they're counting that on their site plan. The 6 is including the garages.
The driveway's 24 feet long. Well, the two long ones are.
Right.
So it'd be one
20 feet
space in the
short.
garage and one in the drive.
Driveways.
So what I was, and I apologize, what I'm having a hard time trying to figure out is, we've got the, we've got this, we can either say yes or no.
Right.
I mean, I don't wanna get into some big discussion about how many, parking spaces we got. It's not part of what this application is about. So if you wanna modify what we've got here, let's do that and vote on it. If you wanna vote no, vote no.
Well, you just capsulized it. Yeah, it's not that complex. I've raised an issue.
Okay.
We've had a conversation
So let's
about
move
it.
on to, are we done with the parking? Does anybody else wanna talk about it?
I thought we voted on it already,
No,
actually.
all we did was open
We
the
opened the
Okay.
discussion.
And we would need to close
You
that,
wanted
make a
to-
motion to close it.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Poole to close the discussion hearing about the parking,
Right.
I'll
Thank you.
second that.
and seconded by Malachi. So, let's continue our discussion about the application, and then at some point, somebody will make a motion to approve or deny the application.
Fair enough.
But as part of that, we have to, according to this underline on 410, we have to make a decision about whether to approve that modification as part of that decision.
How do you want that as part of this application? How do you want to put that in there?
So I just included that because it's a request from Public Works. It's not really something you're taking action
Oh,
on.
'cause
You
it
could
said on-
informally say that you support his waiver.
Because on 410 it said
Right.
that he had supported if Planning Commission approved it.
Right. I think he just wants your verbal agreement that you're okay with that waiver, so that when they bring the revised plans in, or we're reviewing the final plans for the project, that they'll be okay with using that modification.
So
But
what do
it's
we
not a
have for
formal
special conditions right now?
Can you, do you have your list of conditions on one of these slides?
It's right
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yep.
You said you haven't seen lighting yet. Is that right?
I asked about lighting, and I was given a verbal description of what was proposed, and that's in the staff report in detail, and I can go over that. But we haven't seen a lighting plan yet, so that's why we've requested to see one before building permits are issued. We would be looking for, shielding, so there's no off-site light spill or anything like that.
And that's typically how it's done at
Right.
this point.
Right.
Sure.
Mhm.
Yep.
And I know it's in the municipal code, but can you make sure to include with their information our time frames for the noise ordinances, so they know what times they can and can't be doing the demolition?
So I think that's in a different section of the code. I don't know if that's in the zoning title.
Well, we have noise ordinances in the Gladstone municipal code.
Right.
And it does come up a lot. It'd be great if we could just make sure to include that with the information that gets back to the applicant, so they know what hours they need to stop by.
I can certainly inform them of that. I think it would probably be Public Works or the Police Department that would enforce that, but I can inform the applicant. Yep, certainly.
We don't have demolitions all that often, so.
I don't believe we really need to add language as far as landscaping, because if this is approved, then they'll certainly present a plan with the screening that matches the driveways, and
Right.
you'll,
Right.
I should say that the
Correct.
planning department would approve that, and so I know that would be fine. Well,
I have to say the images that we were given for the new property are a lot better than what it looks like today.
And what? I'm sorry.
Than what the house looks like today.
Yes.
we use that as criteria.
Well, I mean,
No, I understand
it does
fully.
improve how it looks, right? I mean,
Oh, sure.
Anything else we want to discuss? We'll make a motion.
I have no other concerns.
I apologize. I just did not understand what was going on, because it looked like we had everything, and it still does.
well, I brought it up because on the paperwork, it said that Jim wanted our approval, so I thought we should discuss it.
Okay. So what's in the application, I think we all agree is fine. So if somebody wanted to make a motion to approve or deny, are we ready for that?
I think we...
Go ahead.
You do it, I'll second it.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the design review application Z0597-18-D and conditional use application Z0598-18-C, and recommend the following findings of the conditions of support of approval for lighting, public works, landscape, fire department approval, design review plan, and Endangered Species Act.
Commissioner Langston,
I second that.
Commissioner Wentz, please call the roll.
Commissioner Langston,
Yes.
Commissioner Malachi,
Yes.
Commissioner Poole,
A hesitant yes.
Commissioner Wentz,
Yes.
Commissioner Pat Smith,
A second hesitant yes.
Chair Rowlett.
Yes. Approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she has something.
We have any comments anybody from the public would like to make now? Anybody want to make any comments, additional comments about anything? Not concerned with anything particularly or anything at all? Thank you. And next we want to add or have a discussion about length of approvals. Was there anything else beyond that?
I just wanted to follow up. Our city administrator, Betts, wanted me to follow up with something for the Planning Commission. In an ordinance adopting the appointment to boards, commissions, and committees, Chapter 2.10.050, Organization and Operation, an annual work plan, states each board, commission, and committee shall prepare an annual work plan which will have elements of the city's strategic plan. These work plans shall be discussed with and approved by the city council in a joint work session. So City Administrator Betts is planning to schedule a meeting with City Council Liaison Mercero and Chairperson Rowlett before the March meeting to talk about a work plan. And I believe then it will be coming to the City Council at a work session scheduled in March. So she just wanted you guys to be aware of that.
So that's what that basically is going to be, is what goals that the City Council has for us during 2019 and things that we would like to get through so we can actually start doing some things beyond the hearings, which I think everybody will look forward to. Things that need to be done as far as the Planning Commission.
Like parking.
Yeah, so that's a good time to talk about, you know, parking, changing the code for parking things, stuff like that. So the City Council is, if I understand, will come up with some things when Tom and I meet, and
I think you guys will be discussing it at that point, yes.
So then what we'll come back with is a list of things that need to be worked on. I'm going to say that parking needs to be one of those, for sure. And that would be in March, so that's going to be probably a lengthy discussion at that point. Also, I think we wanted to, now how should we handle this thing about the time limits on the approvals?
I think that was to be brought up under business from the commission, but if you're wanting me to...
Well, I kind of, so tonight we can, like, start the discussion, but at some point we'd have to make a recommendation to City Council that the code be changed, correct?
So what we're looking, if you want to read what City Administrator Betts was...
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So tonight's, we're wanting to bring up the explanation for discussion of a 1-year extension for... Sorry, let me pass these out first. For time limits for conditional use. So I'm going to give you each a copy of the current language for time limits on conditional use approvals. If you'll take one and pass it down. So what we're asking Planning Commission, if they want to consider extending design review approval to 2 years instead of 1. If they do, then we can bring that information back to the Planning Commission to discuss in April or May. If the Commission is fine with leaving it as the 1 year, then there's no discussion at a later time. She's just wanting to make sure we're aware that we've had 2 approvals expire in the past year. Some of it's been to the developer's fault for not paying attention to deadlines. However, you know, the government processes are slower than usual due to the number of projects in the queue. So it has been brought up that there may be a suggestion we may want to extend it to 2 years, but it's ultimately up to the Planning Commission. And if we are wanting to discuss that, we may, just to let you guys know, for the March meeting, we already have 2 land use applications for them to consider. So this would be looking at maybe bringing to you for April or May to discuss.
So the question for tonight is, do we want to discuss in April or May extending the time limits on our approvals? In the November 2018 meeting, we approved 2 things. One was Tonkin. The other one was an apartment building near 82nd on Clarendon Street. And both of those expired before the building permits were issued, and so they had to reapply. And they didn't ask for the extension. So do we want to discuss extending the time to 2 years with an extension, or do we want to say we like the 1 year with a 1 year extension?
So I would like to remind us that we added it specifically because certain company, I won't say who, was using the expiration and continuing without the permit, with the assumption that they could, because we didn't have this kind of language in there, and so we started doing this specifically because of that. And when this first came up, our code changed during that year window, and so because they let it expire, they had to comply with the new code. So if we're looking at doing substantial code reviews and changes, that's going to have an impact on this.
So that would be the kinds of things that we're going to discuss in, not next month, but after that. Because we have 2 probably really long hearings that are going to be next month, which is City Hall and, what was the other one?
One is the Civic Center.
We've got a big project on Webster too.
It's finally the CARS plan.
Oh yeah, car plan. It's a landscape thing, which could be a fun discussion, and then the Civic Center design review. So tonight, let's just say yes or no. Do we want to discuss this, or should we tell City Council that we're good with the 1 year thing?
I think we should have a brief discussion, because my feeling is that, well, I've got a couple of thoughts. One is, I agree with the situation, I agree with the problem. Sometimes the problem is the responsibility of the developer. I've been there. I had an application once that I mailed in, and they didn't get it and opened it, and when it came time for approval, I was now paying the new tax to support the schools. Well, the point I'm trying to get at is, we're looking at 1 year as a standard we've had for a long time, and do we extend that? I think it's a good idea, But doubling it seems arbitrary. I think 18 months, and I don't want to get too far in this, but my first thought was, where's the discussion of maybe 18 months instead of 2 years? Because there's two words here that I've seen many times: substantial construction. Now, we've had discussions about people getting into a project, not a commercial one necessarily, but that goes on and on and on. So maybe we'll look at 18 months, but I certainly am not opposed to the conversation and certainly not opposed to extending it. But I think doubling it automatically, because that fits the calendar and came to someone's mind, I just think maybe that's running it out too far. So that would be
you're
my...
yes.
Yeah, I'm yes, absolutely.
Are we discussing
About it.
it now, or are we
We're gonna
discussing
discuss
about
it.
discussing it
All we're
later?
going to say is yes or no. Do we want to discuss it at a later date?
Yes.
So I have a whole bunch of stuff I want to say too, but I'm not going to.
Right.
Because we're just saying yes or no. Do we want to discuss?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yes, yes,
Fine.
yes,
I'm fine with that. Yep.
You
yes.
can abstain.
So yes, we all want to discuss it.
Okay, thank you.
Good deal.
That was easy. Kind of.
We have
pretty
another
short.
one pending too that expired, and they're working on a design review.
Do we know why they're expiring?
They were in the building permit phase, and I think for at least 6 months or more going back and forth with plan revisions, and didn't realize that their design review was expiring in that time frame. They expressed concern that the county wasn't automatically sending them a notice that their design review was going to expire, and we've explained to the applicant, we don't have the resources to automatically notify everybody, or there's not a kind of system like that our building permit staff have either, associated with land use. So if it's something the city wanted to pursue, certainly you could look into that, but it's my understanding that they just waited until kind of the last minute to get their building plan in, and kind of thought that would vest them without actually starting construction.
Right.
So maybe as part of this discussion when we do it,
Okay,
we
real
should
clear
also
to them
look
up
at
front.
possible things we can do to help.
Have 1 year period.
There are, it could be that other jurisdictions they work in have 2-year expiration periods, and they could just be presuming based on experience in other jurisdictions.
Yep,
That's
that
great.
also. County has a much higher limit, so time expiration date, I think it's 4 years.
We do
right?
have a problem with notifying. I actually talked to Jeff Jolly about the same thing with our alarm permits. We never send notices to people. So I think improving notifications could help. We can talk about stuff like that.
You know, it's, okay. I don't want to discuss it tonight.
Good
All right,
news.
other business from the planning commission. Was there anything else, Tammy?
Nothing else, no.
Okay, other business from the planning commission. Anybody?
Yes. We all got a nice note from City Administrator Betts about old lots that things could be built on that didn't have to go back through the planning system. Somehow they're grandfathered in. There's a duplex going up on Oatfield Road almost at the intersection of Webster. I've never seen anything discussed about it, and it wasn't mentioned in the letter that she sent out, and I just wondered how that
Where's
went.
that at?
On Oatfield Road, almost at the intersection of Webster and Oatfield.
Well, there was a complex at that intersection that we went over a while back.
So I'm happy to give you background on that.
We did do that?
No, I'm happy to give you background on that. It was just a building permit. So
Okay.
it's in the R7.2 zone where duplexes are allowed.
Okay.
So it wasn't a platted lot line where they could do a partition or subdivision
Okay,
and get
perfect.
two. It's on one lot, and they're just doing duplex. We signed off on the building permit.
And I'd like to make a comment about your presentation, which is, it's always excellent. Love to have you. But there was one statement in there that I found to be very arbitrary.
Sure.
And you said that this thing that was before us tonight fits the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, what criteria do you use to decide that something either does or doesn't fit, besides the
Right.
land use laws, that it fits the neighborhood?
So it's subjective. It's in the conditional use approval criteria, and I can read it for you. But it basically, you want it to find that it's suitable for the neighborhood, that it matches community character.
Okay.
So that's where that came from.
But the character's changing.
I would,
Well, I mean,
Well, what we made the finding that because there's an apartment complex next door, it's down the block from Portland Ave, and then there's single family on the other side, that it's a great kind of transition use between single family and then higher density apartments, so.
I would respectfully disagree that it fits the neighborhood, based on this. And I don't think you were around, and I'm not sure about the city attorney. But they had a project built, Webster Road Apartments, that backed up onto Stone Oaks Court. And you have this 3-story monolith overlooking these houses. People have testified here at the Planning Commission, again, I think it was before your time with us, that their houses were basically unsaleable. So building a 2-story, 30-some foot high apartment building in a layer of single homes, and the apartments that are in there are all single homes, it doesn't seem to me that fits the neighborhood. If this same project, and it looked great, everything about it looked to be really nice. Doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the offer. If it was built on Webster Road, up where those apartments are, down on River Road by the children's golf course, it fits right in. It doesn't fit in over here. And it's awful tough for a commissioner to vote against that when they're in line with all the regulations. But House Bill 2001 that's in the legislature now that I'm fairly sure you're familiar with, it's probably going to pass. This is coming. We're going to have more multifamily homes, and making sure that they do fit the neighborhood, I think, is the first criteria, and making sure it's acceptable to the rest of the community, not just throwing anything in that kind of feels good. So I'm off my soapbox now.
Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up on that, those criteria that have that kind of open-ended language is very deliberately written to be open-ended to allow the Planning Commission to exercise its discretion where it's allowed to. So oftentimes the Commission will get the staff report, and staff's doing its best to try to anticipate what it thinks the Commission's direction and intent is, but whenever an individual commissioner or the commission as a body disagrees with that finding, they're always free to pinpoint that criterion and say, the proposed finding in the staff report isn't exactly what we had in mind, and we either don't feel that that criterion's met or it's met because of blank. But it's those kind of, fits the community is a classic one, or in the best interests of the city. Language like that is drafted to allow decision-making bodies of the city to exercise their maximum discretion where they're allowed to.
But isn't neighborhood character clearly defined in land use? I don't want to get too deep here, but the only reason I ask it is that it's a little ambiguous in some of the things that you see and hear out here, but then when I look at what the definition of neighborhood character is, it's more finite than what I'm seeing on the streets, from just an observation or maybe a
so there's a couple things there. I'm not sure exactly if the code has any specific definition, but that's where I'd start with direction on that. And if it doesn't, I would go back to direction kind of from your city council to see if they have defined that, perhaps in the comprehensive plan or something of that nature, the design review, design review standards. And then short of that, it generally is open to its common usage meaning of whatever phrase you're talking about. So the standard would be, is the interpretation of the applicable phrase that the Commission is applying, does that pass the kind of squint test for what that phrase says on its face? That being said, I always say to the reviewing bodies that I advise that as things change over time, and as the composition of a decision-making body changes over time, an interpretation can change with that, with both of those.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think,
definition in the code.
Gladstone is a mix of, stuff from 1900 on up, and there's a lot of, in any neighborhood, if you drive through it, you'll see 1920s houses, 1930s, 40s, 50s, where the big building booms 60s, 70s. You know, neighborhoods like Sherwood Forest are different because the whole thing was built in the 70s.
Right.
And so that's all the same. But in the R5 zone, it's a real mixture. Now that particular property over there on Fairfield or Exeter, that single family house on the corner is the only one in that strip there because it's the fire station, a bunch of one level apartments, you know, flat 3, 4, or 5 plexes or something. And then there's that lot where the triplex is going to go. There's a single family on the corner, and the next one's a duplex. And then the community, or what's that thing called?
The community club.
Community club, which is not owned by the city.
Correct.
And then there's a single family after that. But that strip there is one house, one single family home on that street after they tear down that little house there. And I happen to know what they paid for that because, you know, I buy houses and stuff. And I was trying to figure out what they're going to do with it. I thought they were going to build something really big there, but they paid a lot of money for that lot. Anyway, and I apologize if I come off sometimes as whatever.
No worries. You're doing your job. You're doing your job, I'm doing mine. Go get it.
That's all I have. Does anybody else have anything? Then,
I do have one quick thing, and that is, this is a redundant subject I brought up, but I certainly hope the community and the city and the staff, I mean, this is literally a cry to everyone, do a little more research on our tolling plan and how it's going to affect Gladstone, because with the Abernathy Bridge and our configuration, the river, we're a choke point. And there's just a lot of concern about the numbers of traffic, the volume of traffic that will be diverted off the freeway. There's some rather specious numbers coming from ODOT, and I'll just let it go at that.
anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Pat Smith,
I'll second. You go ahead. We'll argue over that.
Yeah.
seconded by Les Poole. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no or nay. None opposed. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Oh my goodness.